Dear reader, allow me to introduce you to my book. Though it might at first appear like many books you've come across, it is far from ordinary. You may, therefore, have some misunderstandings about its nature. The story that awaits you has not been fully told. In fact, its conclusion is not yet known. Even it is in that way that my book is special. It is in that way that you are special. Without you, there is no story. Chapter 1. Normal isn't what it used to be. This is a story about change. Nestled in a shallow valley is the town of Beacon Pines. Far from the town square, across the river, past the neglected welcome sign, a young boy walks alone at dawn. His name is Luka Van Horn, and like you, dear reader, he's here for a reason. Was Luka's closest friend. He possessed many fine qualities, but subtlety was not one of them. Rollo finally noticed the tears welling in his friend's eyes and the flowers on the grave. Wonderful! I had a good feeling about you from the moment you opened my book. That charm is a very special thing. Very special indeed. Keep hold of it for now. Its purpose will reveal itself soon enough. Rollo looked to the side suspiciously. Dear reader, forgive me for this interlude. Remember that charm you found in the dandelion patch? There are more of those special charms to discover throughout Beacon Pines. They've been known to reveal themselves to those who are willing. Some of them can be found in this very house. Gran had commandeered the upstairs closet when she moved in. Some things need shelter from a young boy's mischief, she said. Luca paused at his parents' bedroom door. He just wasn't ready to go in yet. Luca knew that if he left without telling Gran, Since Gran had moved in, the house was more peaceful and more covered in flowery fabric. Gran had already lit the fire. She kept a warm house, as if by grandmotherly obligation. One of his father's old stuff, Luca had spent countless hours, not for years though. Luca knew that if he left without telling, just some dusty knickknack. Oh my, this is quite exciting. I am now certain that you are the one You'll recall I was a bit coy regarding the use of charms earlier. Excuse me, I tend to have a flair for the dramatic. You are about to encounter your first turning point. There are certain times in this tale when everything hinges on a single word. Step forth, dear reader. Young Luca would spend hours hiding in the... She always enjoyed humoring him by... Luca stared at his feet and muttered under his breath. Right, of course. I forgot about the pajamas. A beginner's guide to gardening laid open on the bench. A sturdy old wheelbarrow. Gran's moving in meant that most of Luca was somewhat annoyed by the situation. Luca tossed on his favorite old sweater. Even though it was the first day of summer, a chill Gran's bed was undisturbed. Luca didn't mind that it meant that he could read. gonna go chill for the day. The best lies are built on truth. Easy. Impressive. You've managed to navigate your first turning point without too much of a mess. That is the power of charms. A single word can change everything. I think it's time to introduce you to the Chronicle. The Chronicle is a record of the decisions you've made. You can see the turning point which has been revealed. At any time, you can use the Chronicle to go back and invoke different charms, creating new branches. Luckily for us, this is the one and only turning point where the charms won't dramatically alter fate. It's the perfect opportunity to experiment with rewriting things. We were just gonna go ponder for the day. This was Luca's chance to sell his alibi. Nailed it. Impressive! You've managed to navigate your first turning point without too much of a mess. That is the power of charms. A single word can change everything. I think it's time to introduce... The Chronicle is a record of the decisions you've made. You can see the turning point, which is at any time, you can use the Chronicle to go back and... Luckily for us, this is the one and only turning point where the charms won't dramatically alter fate. It's the perfect opportunity. We were just gonna go chill for the day. The best lies are built on truth. Easy. pair of dull scissors, a broken can opener, a mostly empty bottle of glue, and some loose string. The only piece of furniture Gran had brought when she moved in was an old hat. An array of prepared meals crowded the roof, each labeled with the day of the week. For a town that saw few visitors, the welcome was perhaps more grand than necessary. Chapter 2. Welcome to Beacon Pines. For many years, this valley had been a small mining outpost. It wasn't until Sharper Valentine built his fertilizer company that Beacon Pines was established. Over the next 30 years, the town had grown and prospered, until the foul harvest and his sudden death. In the 6 years since, everyone was simply trying to get by. a pen from the Pete stopped scribbling and glanced up. Mr. Sinclair continued, a tactic he often used. William Kerr was the CEO of Perennial Heart. He had become a fixture after the failing of Valentine. The town was hungry. Mayor Augustus Valentine. Flustered, Gus instinctively loosened his tie. The road leading to Beacon Pines was long and uninspiring. A sort of natural barrier for the impatient. Whenever Luca saw his stats, it reminded him of the days they... Luca opened the tackle box and picked... Luca tied a shoestring. What fish could resist... Luca gently baited a feather onto the hook, good for skimming the surface. Luca tied what fish could... Luca tied what fish could... Luca tied what fish could... Luca gently, good for skim. tied a shoe. What fish could resist? Luca tied a shoe. What fish could resist? Luca gently baited a feather for skimming the surface. Luca tied. What fish could... Luca tied. What fish could... tied what fish could. Luca gently good for skimming the. Luca gently good for. Luca tied what fish could. On certain nights, when the clouds were just right, the boys could tune into strange patterns of static. Rollo thinks it's aliens. He always thinks it's aliens. After Luca's father had passed, Rollo became obsessed with them building their own Hank atomic star scraper. It was some time before Luca realized it was Rollo's way of keeping him occupied. Holden Wilder ran the local The Beacon. Oh, right. This is an important turning point. The first time where your charms will change the course of fate. And currently, we only have one suitable charm at our disposal. Have no fear, we can always return later using the Chronicle once we find more charms. Well, now I'm just rambling. Where were we? Rollo froze as Roxy took a step toward him, cracking her knuckles. Luca knew he had one chance to save his friend from being dragged home. In the past, he found the best way to deal with an enraged Roxy was to be a little chill. A bit much, if you ask me. Jeff's hardware closed down about it. The effects of the foul harvest stretched wide. When there are no crops in the field, tractors don't need fixing. A promise Gran regretted the second it was. The Valentine mansion loomed over both figuratively and after the foul harvest, the Valentines shuttered off their estate from the rest of town. The path led into a small hollow at the edge of Weepwood. The fence thrummed with a gentle electric buzz. Luca often asked himself what Rollo would do, so that he could rule out that option. As sparks flew from the fence, the light atop that section shut off. Two bulbs remain. One more to go. The fence's buzzing gave way to silence. Every kid in town knew the old Valentine fertilizer building. Long abandoned, the warehouse once served as the industrial heart of Beacon Pines. Now, it stood only as a reminder of things left behind. The dormant building showed strange signs of life. There was only one way to find out. The hose emitted a sound. It was actively draining. Luca thought he heard faint sounds. He pressed his ear against the cold metal to hear better. The sound of footsteps grew louder. The heavy steel door knocked Luca to the ground. Disoriented, he looked up to see an imposing figure silhouetted in a green glow. It lunged toward him. He tried to scramble away, but felt a gloved hand latch onto his ankle. Luca watched his fingernails leave trails in the dirt as the hand slowly dragged him back through the door, into the lab, into the green light. This is a story about change. It was far from the sort of change Luca imagined for himself. But change is, after all, a dangerous animal. The end? I probably should have warned you about this. There are many paths that our story can take. Most will end in tragedy, but don't let that discourage you. We will find the ending that this story deserves. I just know it. From here on out, a charm will have a check mark when it's been used to its full potential at a given turning point. Now, let's try something different. This is a story about change. It was far from the sort of change Luca imagined for himself. But change is, after all, a dangerous animal. The end? I probably should have warned you about this. There are many paths that our story can take. Most will end in tragedy, but don't let that discourage you. We will find the ending that this story deserves. I just know it. From here on out, a charm will have a check mark when it's been used to its full potential at a given turning point. Now, let's try something different. This is a story about change. It was far from the sort of change Luca imagined for himself. But change is, after all, a dangerous animal. The end? I probably should have warned you about this. There are many paths that our story can take. Most will end in tragedy, but don't let that discourage you. We will find the ending that this story deserves. I just know it. From here on out, a charm will have a check mark when it's been used to its full potential at a given turning point. Now, let's try something different. This is a story about change. It was far from the sort of change Luca imagined for himself. But change is, after all, a dangerous animal. The end? I probably should have warned you about this. There are many paths that our story can take. Most will end in tragedy. We will find the ending that this story... From here on out, a charm will... Now, let's... In the past, he found the best way to deal with an enraged Roxy was to be a little shit. Solomon Valentine, current ward of and future successor to the Valentine fortune, huffed as he brushed off his pants. Solomon trifled a gesture toward the approaching heiress Valentine. As the glowing windows of the old warehouse came into view, Rollo began to bounce excitedly. The boy sat petrified under the weight of... Rollo felt around. He snapped off a tag from just within a small zipper opening in the bag. Rollo held the badge up to a faint shaft of light within the dumpster. Luca sat in the dark, tracking the sound of Rollo's footsteps as he ran. One, two, three. He pressed his ear to the dumpster wall, straining to hear Rollo's footsteps as they faded away. 15, 16, 17. He tried not to think about the contents of the dumpster as he counted. 35, 36, 37. The thick stench made it hard to breathe. Screw it, that's long enough. Luca carefully lifted the lid and peered out. Nothing. No sign of Rollo. No sign of the man in the yellow suit. Time to haul ass. Luca clambered from the dumpster, stumbling to his knees. He was up like a shot and running, sprinting toward home as fast as he could. Beacon Pines flew by, blurred by the tears that welled up in his eyes. He wouldn't remember getting home at all that night. Throwing his front door open, storming up the stairs to his room and surrendering to sleep almost as abruptly as he hit his pillow. Chapter 3. Finding a Friend. The next morning, it was quieter than usual at the breakfast table. Only the sound of silverware and chewing interrupted the awkward silence. Gran's brow, she let out a long An eerie electronic sound echoed from Luca's bedroom. A pit formed in Luca's stomach. Luca's mouth felt dry. Luca could feel his heart. Toby looked up from the clipboard. Kato volunteered at the library during the summers. He wasn't very social, making him a reliable source of very particular knowledge. If you were to ask Kato something he didn't know, he'd escape into the dusty old bookshelves and return with just the right thing. Kato was lost in his reading. Luka crooked his neck to see the title, Introduction to Melitology. He gestured to the shelf. The bottom corner shelf was a dusty array of thick science books. Only one binding was clean enough to read: Cellular Biology and the Chemistry of Mitosis. There were rarely any actual, simply a variety of the Cobb's Ivy, a salad-centric travel guide. Sally Seashore, Luka brushed off 30 recipes. A peek behind the methods in one of the group by Beck's family moved off, giving her little time to establish, and she would tell you she prefers it that way. Luka shifted his feet uncomfortably. Beck pulled a coin from her pocket. The phone booth was brand new. It didn't see much use. Luca felt a chill as he approached Beck. Her eyes were locked on the strange green liquid. The nearby grass was coated in a fine layer of frost. Luca watched as Beck's eyes widened as flowers grew from the dead wood. First small buds, which quickly bloomed. As quickly as they had grown, Beck dropped the stick with a grunt of Iggy took a step towards Luca, his sneer lit by the glowing puddle. Beck could see tears welling in Luca's eyes, his fists clenched. Some things about Beacon Pines were very different from the city. But a bully from a hayseed town is really no different from a city bully. Beck took a deep breath and thought. Well, time to bust out the tickles. Beck lunged forward and began to tickle under Tish's arm. Tears began to form in Tish's eyes as she gasped for breath between gales of laughter. Beck redoubled her efforts until Tish finally had had enough. Iggy's eyes darted around, a realization dawning on his face that he was now outnumbered. Iggy kicked at the puddle before making his escape. Beck shook the ooze out of her hair as best as she could. Chapter 4. The Best Policy. Luca paused for a moment, catching his breath. He'd only just met Beck, and somehow he already managed to drag her into this mess. Hopefully he could make it up to her, but finding Rollo was his primary concern. Roxy and Fitz looked drained. It was clear they'd spent all day searching. Roxy's temper could often be dismissed as the impatience of an older sibling, but this was the most intense Luca had ever seen. Her eyes were wild and unfocused. In a torrent of rambled words and tears, Roxy, still exhausted and angry, softened briefly as her eyes hunted the ground in thought. With a determined sigh, she looked up at Luca. Roxy drew herself up. Roxy tried to think of the safest place. Luca wiped his cheeks and gave a quick nod. Looking into the puddle, Roxy rubbed her arms to warm up. The Valentine mansion loomed over every other building in town. Both figuratively and literally. Mr. Nuncree jumped with a start. Luca motioned to the phone booth. Mr. Nuncree gently placed one of his substantial hands on Luca's shoulder. Luca peered up at Mr. Nuncree. Kind eyes warmed a stern face. There was a deeper emotion hiding beneath it all. It was subtle, but Luca could sense something eating away at him. There was a shame lurking behind those eyes. A deep sadness. If If Mr. Nuncreed was that worried about Rollo, maybe he could help. Mr. Nuncreed raised an eyebrow. Mr. Nuncreed's shoulders slumped. A deep sigh bellowed from his chest. Luka attempted to take a step back, but Nuncreed's hand clamped down on his shoulder. With a firm shove, Nuncreed manhandled Luka into the phone booth. The door latched shut with a mechanical hiss. As Luka pounded the glass, the floor dropped from under his feet. The inside of the phone booth was now a loose capsule plummeting at gravity's whim. Luka winced and pressed his hands to the walls. As he braced for impact, the capsule hurried to a surprisingly smooth stop. He felt a cold rush of air and opened his eyes with two large figures in hazmat suits occluded his view. Luka heard the deep, resigned voice of Mr. Nuncreed over an intercom. He knows too much. The end. Wait, this isn't the end. I know there's still much more. Somehow this went wrong. Okay, let's try something else. There was deep sadness. If Mr. Nuncreed was that worried about Rollo, maybe he could help. Mr. Nuncreed raised Mr. Nuncreed's shoulders slumped. A deep sigh. Luka attempted to take a step back, but Nuncreed's hand clamped down on his shoulder. With a firm shove, Nuncreed manhandled Luka into the phone. The door latched shut with a mechanical hiss. As Luka pounded the glass, the floor dropped from under his feet. The inside of the phone booth was now a loose capsule plummeting at gravity's whim. Luka winced and pressed his hands to the walls. As he braced for impact, the capsule hurried to a surprisingly smooth stop. He felt a cold rush of air and opened his eyes with hesitance. Two large figures in hazmat suits occluded his view. Luka heard the deep, resigned voice of Mr. Nuncreed over an intercom. He knows too much. The end. Wait, this isn't the... I know there's still... Somehow this went wrong. Okay, let's try... Well, time to bust out the strange. Beck stared, and the only sign of life being the... At the The sight of Iggy taunting Iggy's smirk shifted to... Iggy's clothes were... Iggy's voice began to slur. The person at the warehouse, this strange ooze, was Rollo. Beck glanced toward Luca. Rollo was safe. A wave of relief washed over Luca, which was quickly replaced by a sense of dread. Gran is going to kill me. If he hurried, he might just make it home before sundown. Chapter 4. Our harvest awaits. Luca took a deep breath and gingerly opened the door, steeling himself for Gran's wrath. Luca was alone. The house was empty. Luca was sitting by the pond, listening to small waves lap against a rock. His father sat in a folding chair in front of him. Without turning, he spoke. "Why don't you grab me some nice bait?" "Sure thing, Dad." Luca hopped over to the tackle box and popped open the lid. Inside was a rolling, buzzing mass. "We're fishing with bees?" Luca's father gave a warm chuckle. "Well, you catch more fish." Luca closed his eyes and plucked out a bee. He could feel its wings struggle between his finger and thumb. Holding it at arm's length, he hurried over. His father deftly baited the hook and examined. "Interesting choice." With a practiced flick of the wrist, the line buzzed and the water accepted it without the wrong choice. The pond began to... "Sometimes we gotta make pallid ice prop." Luca scrambled back as the dad. Sorry, kiddo. Understanding isn't always part of the relentless ice. Dad, look out! His father casually wound. "None of it's your fault, you know. Never was." "Dad, we have to go." Luca grabbed his father's shoulders, trying to pull him away. "Please, you have..." The ice crackled as it... That's the thing about fish. His chest began to crystallize. You toss your hook in, and you never know what you're gonna pull out. A shock of searing cold ran up Luca's arms. He gave one last desp. The chair tipped backwards in a single frozen mass. Luca tried to stop the momentum, but it was too late. He watched the icy form of his dad. The gentle rustle of leaves was the only... Luca's eyes struggled to focus on the walkie-talkie. Faintly, he could hear Rollo. Rollo's voice was coming through more clearly now. But some words were... Luca's eyes struggled to focus on the walkie-talkie.